Well, we're back with another episode of Lovecraft Country. Now, I usually begin these reviews by giving the episode a grade. And this one's actually kind of hard for me to give it a grade. Like, my personal review and grade should reflect my personal enjoyment of the episode, right? If so, then this episode's getting like a D, maybe an F for me. But then again, an episode review should also reflect how good I thought the episode was, not just if I personally enjoyed it. And if I do that, then it's an A. And I know that sounds extreme and like I'm crazy, but in order to do a review for these videos, I watch the episode through once, and then I go back and I watch it again and take notes. This is the first time that I really did not want to watch it again, because A, it scared the shit out of me, and I don't like that feeling. Plus, it was just a very heavy and dark episode. I didn't end the episode feeling good, but the part of my brain that wasn't like cowering in the corner and also just kind of depressed knows that the episode was really well done. Like, it was trying to be dark and scary and heavy, and it absolutely accomplished all of those goals with me. It reminds me of Stephen King. Like, I've read 3 Stephen King books in my life, and I hated all of them. But I'm also aware that the reason I hate them is because they're really well written. Like, Stephen King has these targets that he's trying to hit, and he hits them with me every time, dead center. It's perfect, but I hate having those targets hit. It's just, I don't like the way it feels. But I have an incredibly huge amount of respect for him as an author, to the point that I almost consider myself a fan. That's a very weird thing to say, I know, but I hear his name and my ears perk up. Like, he's a guy who does something that I hate, but he does it really well, and I find it super impressive how well he does it. All of that to say, that's how I feel about this episode. It did something that I did not enjoy, but it did it really well. But I absolutely did not want to go back and experience it again. But for the sake of this video, I did. You're welcome. Anyway, as you've probably guessed from what I just said, this episode dipped back into the horror genre. For me, I'd say this episode is the darkest episode so far. Even beyond like the magical, fantastical horror moments that happen, there is real life horror in this episode. It is tragic and ominous, and for me, there was just this heavy feeling permeating every scene. Almost every scene, but we'll get into that later. I think if I'm gonna have to finalize a grade, I'm gonna land on an A. But just with the qualifier that it's an amazing episode. It's really well crafted. It's well done, but viewing it was just not a pleasant experience for me. Anyway, from here on out, I'm going to go into a full spoiler recap. So if you haven't watched the episode, stop now, go watch the episode, and come back. So the episode begins with a crowd of people slowly walking down the street, and it's soon revealed that this is the funeral of Emmett Till. And right away, I'm going to insert myself into this recap. On the second viewing, I actually found myself wondering if this is why even the magical, fantastical horror elements hit me harder than usual, because this context, this real life event as a sort of framing device for the show, I was immediately more open and vulnerable to whatever story they were going to tell. Emmett Till was a real person. This horrible thing really happened to a young boy. I have a very vivid memory of when I first heard his story. I was sobbing in the back of my class. I think it was a history class in high school. And so I wonder if having something so real, so tragic as a setting for this story, I wonder if that made the rest of it feel more real to me. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, we see Ruby and Dee in line to go to the viewing, and the oppressive heat, the disorienting feeling just sort of comes through so well, both on Dee's face and like the way things are filmed. This is overwhelming for her, for everyone, for us too. Tick and Letty are also there, and they get into an argument about telling Dee that her mother is dead because apparently Hippolyta hasn't returned yet from her space excursion in last week's episode. This is surprising to me. In the midst of this chaos, Dee runs off on her own, resulting in our main characters sort of splitting up to look for her. splitting up the party. We follow Dee as she wanders around on her own, and she's obviously traumatized by what happened to her friend, and she lashes out at two girls who are just having fun and giggling to themselves. She gets pulled aside by some cops, one of whom is the cop we keep seeing, the super racist one. I forget his name. He's the one who wants to become part of the Magic Order. They confirm that she is the person who drew the comic book that we saw last week under the body of the dead cop, and then ask her who her mother is, but they can't seem to understand the name, saying something about African names, which, yeah, Hippolyta is very much not an African name. These cops are idiots. But we knew that. Anyway, they ask her where her mother is, and she doesn't know. One of the cops starts drawing some, like, symbols on the ground, so we know some magic shit's about to go down. The main racist cop spits on Dee's forehead and then starts speaking in the language of Adam, and, like, maggots start growing out of the ground, and they release her and, walk off, and she wipes the gross spit off of her head and walks off. And okay, something I did not notice on my first viewing, but creeped the fuck out of me on my second. While the cops have Dee in a chokehold, she looks off at this, like, cream of wheat advertisement, which has, like, your standard friendly black man on it. We've actually seen, I think, this exact ad in this show before, and now I kind of want to go back and see if, like, creepy shit happened every time we saw it, or if it's just because of the curse that this cops have put on Dee. Because as she runs off past it, the ads, like the friendly black man, his eyes turn and follow her. Letty goes back to, like, her big house to see if Dee is there, and there's a woman there looking for Tick. It's not revealed at this moment, but I knew from the instant we saw her silhouette that this was Gia, and yay, I knew she had to come back. I knew it. Tick, meanwhile, is off at some mausoleum to meet with Christina. And, okay, so earlier I mentioned how almost every scene had, like, this heavy, oppressive feeling. Well, this is one that didn't. With actually one exception, all of Christina's scenes in this episode didn't land for me. And I don't think it's the actress's fault. I think it's just the writing. For the most part, her scenes just feel very functional. Like, she's there to push the plot forward. She exposits something, she gets a token that will further her quest, and then the scene ends. In this scene, she tells Tick how to do a spell, she gets the key to the time machine that's, not a time machine, and that's it. Next scene. Oh, but before she leaves, Tick asks her about the autumnal equinox, which obviously catches her off guard, but she tells him she's going to become immortal then. Dee returns to her home, and Montrose is there and scolds her for, going off on her own. Dee yells out the standard, you're not my father, and then asks if her mother is also dead, and then shuts herself in the bathroom. Yeah, there's another creepy thing here that I didn't notice on my first viewing. I just don't know how I missed this, but I sure as hell picked it up on the second. There's a copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin in the bathroom. It has a picture of a white girl and a black girl on the cover, and the black girl's hair is done up in, like, those multiple bows. But when Dee looks back at it, the black girl has this gruesome grin on her face, and it do not want. The book falls on the ground of its own accord, and I do not like this at all, and Dee agrees with me, and she escapes out the window. Ruby returns to William/Christina's house, and after some, not-so-casual racism at the gate, she goes in with William. William does seem to actually be genuinely concerned for Ruby, and he, like, bathes her, and then they begin to kiss, but Ruby stops and takes the potion first. And okay, so now I've got some questions, because we actually see the transformation process here, and it totally calls into question that scene from an earlier episode when Christina went inside and William immediately came out. How on earth did they do that? The transformation isn't that fast, and also it doesn't transform your clothes. So Christina would have had to transform and do, like, a super fast outfit switch for that scene to happen as we saw it. And, like, I don't see that happening. But okay, we get a sex scene between Ruby and White, I guess, and William. But, oh, okay, I haven't even gotten to the weirdest part of this. Because, like, as Ruby climaxes, to use a word that comes up later, she literally bursts out of the white skin, which, doesn't the potion last longer than that? Or is this, like, the culmination of hours of love making? Because I don't think your average lovemaking session lasts the same as, say, like, a work shift at a department store. It's weird. But aside from the absolute grossness of that, I was just confused. And also, are we gonna get a Ruby Christina sex scene? I'm asking for a friend. And if we do, I'd like to put in a request for, like, a no skin explosion. Okay? Thanks, bye. Tick arrives back at the house, sees a pair of shoes outside the door, and knows that Jia is inside. Jia's sitting at the table with Letty, and Letty looks shook by whatever she's been told. And here, I initially thought Jia had told him about Tick, like, murdering and torturing people in Korea, and that's why Letty was upset. But we switch then to Dee walking around Chicago wearing what I think is Bobo's hat. She goes to the subway where she... Okay, here's where the real creepy begins. She sees these two girls with their hair done up like on the cover of Uncle Tom's Cabin, but with like that gruesome grin carved into their faces. And they are dancing and contorting in a most disturbing way. And just, okay, serious props to these actors, because damn, they are killing it. It's creeping me out. And I do think that these girls are meant to mirror those two girls that we saw earlier, who were just having fun and not concerning themselves with what had happened to Emmett Till. These ghouls, these spirits are celebrating, and they're having their evil fun. And, you know, when you're grieving, it can feel almost gruesome or disgusting or disturbing to see other people just going on with their lives. Anyway, these girls begin to stalk her, and their claws sort of grow and reach out for her as she runs away in terror. Back at the house, though, we learned that no, Jia did not tell Letty about Tick. She told Letty about herself, that she's a gumiho, and that yes, she's killed 100 men. It's her nature. But then she says to Tick, you know, what's your excuse? And yeah, Jia is a literal monster. Tick is just a man who shot a woman in the head. But Letty still doesn't know about this, so we're just fixating on the fact that he had encountered a monster before and not told Letty about it, which, given that what they're in the middle of right now, does kind of feel like a big omission. Fair enough. Anyway, Tick starts asking Jia about his death that she foresaw, but she doesn't have any answers. She usually is the moment of death, so she's not used to having to decipher clues to figure out what's happening, you know, in her, like, viewings or whatever. Tick starts yelling at her like a psycho, asking her why she's here, but Letty gets it. You know, Jia's there because she loves Tick. And I guess we're setting up a love triangle, which, I mean, fine, but Tick isn't worth it, ladies. Like, he's a murderer. And yes, so is Jia, but she's an actual monster who is summoned for the purpose of murder. She's got an excuse. Letty leaves the room, and then Tick is awful to Jia, and okay, so yeah, I began to cool on him a bit in the Gumiho episode, but he's getting worse, in my opinion. Upstairs, Letty starts reaming Tick out for keeping this whole thing a secret, and again, I'm frustrated that they're focusing on, in my opinion, the wrong thing, but I guess also Letty's not wrong. Tick kept this secret even after all the monsters started cropping up out of some weird I'm trying to protect you thing, which obviously hasn't worked because, as Letty very correctly points out, despite the fact that he's the one who has this death prophesied over him, everyone but him seems to be dying. Tick decides he's going to cast a protection spell, and Letty, again, quite rightly calls him out for, you know, A, trusting Christina in the first place, and B, thinking he gets to make this decision for everyone. Back with Ruby and William, who is now Christina, and okay, this might be the most silly thing I'm going to say, but I mean, I can't help it. I usually don't notice clothes, but whatever you call that kind of dress Christina is wearing, I like it. It looks amazing on her. I couldn't pull it off, but she looks fantastic. Okay, back to the show. Ruby accuses Christina of not caring about the brutal death of a 14-year-old boy, which she describes in detail, and goes on to tell Christina how she wants her to feel. She wants her to feel heartbroken, ashamed, guilty. I can't summarize this scene. You gotta watch it. It's the one Christina scene, like it's a Ruby scene, but Christina's in it. It's the one scene with Christina in it in this episode that hits home for me. She tells her that the reason she took the potion before, when they were having sex, when she was William, was because she did not want to be a black woman sleeping with a white man on this day of all days. But Christina then admits that no, she doesn't care about Emmett Till, but she doesn't think Ruby does either. She thinks that Ruby wouldn't have sex with her until she was wearing white, so to speak, because it was the only way she could admit to herself that she wanted what she wanted, even on this horrible day. And I think they're both kind of right. Dee makes her way back to Letty's house, where she bumps into Letty as she's heading out. Letty is preoccupied and like really dismissive and rude to Dee, who, remember, is a child whose best friend's funeral was today. This is just weird to me, Letty's behavior. But anyway, the point of this scene is not Letty. It's that those ghost girls are still there, still stalking Dee, but no one else can see them, and they are still fucking terrifying. Tick meets up with his dad, and they have a bit of a heart-to-heart, and I feel like they, bury the hatchet here. Tick shows him that copy of Lovecraft Country that he brought back from the portal, and yeah, it's written by George Freeman, but it turns out that it's his son. He went to the future when he went through the portal, and he knows Letty's pregnant with his child, but she just hasn't told him yet. He explains the plot of the book to his dad, which is kind of funny because he explains some differences in the plot, which I am very curious to know if the differences he explains are differences between the book and the series, but whatever. He also explains that the book has Christina sacrificing him on the autumnal equinox, which I guess is where that question came from. Meanwhile, Letty's in church praying for God to protect Tick while he does black magic. And this cracked me up. You may not know this about me, but I grew up in a very religious household. And yeah, her praying for God to protect Tick, who is off doing magic spells, just the contradiction in it just made me laugh. But okay, here's another Christina exposition scene. Christina comes in, gets the negatives of the pictures that Letty took of the pages in exchange for making Letty invulnerable. Letty did initially ask to put the invulnerability spell on Tick, but Christina refused. Dee, still being pursued by the ghost girls, goes to see the racist magic cops. She asks if her mom is dead. They don't know, but say it's likely. She asks what they did to her, and they say it was something to stop her from telling other people about their conversation. She asks what happens if, it gets her. And he doesn't answer, but he says he can remove the curse if she gets him the orrery, asking if she knows what an orrery is. And she gets offended at this question, but I wouldn't have known. But then she calls out the other cop for being an idiot about her mom's name.
And my mama's name is Hippolyta. It's Greek, asshole.
He tells her he'll save her when she gets the orrery, and then she spits on him and leaves. Good girl. But she comments out the smell as she goes, which I feel like that's going to be important because it's a very weird thing to mention. But after she leaves, a racist cop says to forget her. She's already dead. So this is not looking good for Dee. As she storms out, and she does storm out, she is angry now, there's another spoken word piece or speech that plays over this scene. This one is an excerpt from a speech given by Naomi Wadler at a rally in Washington, D.C. In 2018. And I love the way they use music and these speeches or poems, interviews. It feels new and fresh to me. I've not seen anything like it before, and I feel like it elevates the scene that you're watching. I don't know, I love it. I love what they're doing with the music and the soundtrack here. Anyway, Dee screams in anger as she rides past the ghost girls, who are, of course, still stalking her. Back at Montrose's, they do the spell. That's really all you need to know. But they don't feel any effects from it. Oh, wait, there's something else from the scene you actually have to know. Montrose, while reading, inverts some words and then reveals that he's dyslexic. Again, this feels like it's going to show up later, so I'm mentioning it now. The next scene, it's weird. It's Christina on a dock somewhere with two men that she has paid to basically kill her in the way Emmett Till was killed. And I don't know what we're supposed to glean from this. Is she trying to gain empathy for what happened to Emmett Till, or to feel something so she can, commiserate with Ruby? I think it has to have something to do with Ruby, because I do think that she actually has real feelings for her. But this is super weird. And aside from just, not enjoying the grossness of the violence, I found it just... What happened to Emmett Till was horrible and brutal and prolonged, and it was a real thing that killed a real person. This was pretend. And even in the show, it's pretend because Christina can't die. She crawls out of the water after this whole and alive. I don't know if I can fully articulate it, but I don't know why. The scene just didn't sit right with me. Back at Letty's house, her and Ruby have an honest conversation. Amazing. Letty tells Ruby that she's pregnant. Ruby tells her that she knows about magic and tells her everything. seems that she actually knows details that we didn't know that she knew. So I guess there's some pretty honest and like expository pillow talk between her and William. Anyway, in the middle of this conversation, Letty gets called upstairs because there's like a whole, squadron? I don't know, way too many police have shown up. The racist cop says that he's heard that there are Nation of Islam extremists hiding out in this house, but of course this is just bullshit. He tries to come in, but the protection spell blocks him. So now both he and Letty know that the other knows magic. He backs off and Letty shuts the door, but just as she's going in, the cops unload. So many bullets. Everyone ducks, but of course Letty remembers that she's invulnerable now and sits up as bullets start like bouncing off of some sort of force field. Tick shows up in the middle of this, sees this gunfight going down and freezes. A cop spots him, turns to fire on him, and Letty sees this and runs out to protect him, but before she can, the cop fires and... Did you forget about those monsters with the eyes all over their bodies from way back in the first few episodes? Because I did. One of them bursts out of the ground and just like wastes all the cops. Or, okay, well, most of them, because I'm not sure if it killed the main racist cop. I think it did take off his arm, but he may have survived. Anyway, the monster then goes up to Tick and practically like purrs. So I guess that was his protection spell. Dee, meanwhile, has gone back to, I'm not actually sure, it's someone's garage. And she locks all the doors but one, and she arms herself with a pipe, and then she picks up some paper and starts sketching the ghost girls. I'm not sure why. But they do eventually come in through the one door that she left open, and like that was really smart of her. You know, they would have come in anyway, but this way she knew where they would come from. I wouldn't have thought of this. She starts swinging her pipe at them, but Montrose overhears this and eventually comes in, and he can't see the ghost girls, so he just sees Dee swinging at nothing and probably thinks she's just having a breakdown, and he restrains her. And as he does, we see her arm begin to spurt blood as something invisible cuts her, and then like this darkness begins to spread up her arm, and then we see that the ghost girls are like doing something to her. This is not looking good. Hippolyta better get her ass back here now. And that's the end of the episode. So yeah, this is upsetting. And it has left so many unfinished bits for what's coming up. I don't know how many episodes this season is going to have, or like even if there's further seasons planned. But there's like Hippolyta, she's missing. Dee is cursed with something that's meant to kill her. There's now like a monster pet or something. Gia is in America, and Christina is planning to kill Tick in a few days. I feel like this is ramping up for the end of a season. The storyline that I thought I was going to be most concerned with was Gia, but she was barely in this episode. But they wouldn't bring her back for just this. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. She's got to be significant going forward. But honestly, I'm way more concerned for Dee. I want whatever has been done to her to be undone, post haste. Anyway, I think I'll end here. Rewatching this episode for my notes was as unpleasant as I expected it to be. This episode it did not leave me feeling good. But I'm pretty sure it wasn't meant to. I'm pretty sure the feeling I had while watching it and afterwards was what was intended. This episode was, in my opinion, for the most part, masterful. I just didn't enjoy the experience of it. Anyway, I will leave it here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, or on my Discord. And check out my Patreon if you want to support me. Links to both of those will be in the description below. And as always, like, subscribe, and see you next time. Bye!